Larisa Brown is the Times' defence editor. Morning, Larissa.
Good morning.
Is this a significant escalation in terms of the gear that's being sent to Ukraine? I mean, it's fair to say that the UK has led the way in supplying military ordnance to Ukraine. Is this a significant step up?
Yeah, so previously we've sent anti-tank weapons, and this is different because this is going to help Ukraine shoot down helicopters and fast jets. And so people that I was speaking to yesterday was saying that it is a step change because this system that we'd be sending is the best in the world against modern air threats. And so obviously it should help Ukraine even more so than we have done previously.
Is there any risk of collateral damage with weaponry like this? Because one of the things we'll get onto this as well. We were looking at the civilian casualties that the Russians are creating. Is there a danger when you have this type of weaponry that it could hit the wrong target?
No, I think because it's using a laser beam, it was as it was explained to me yesterday. Basically, the operator points the laser at the target, so it'll point at the aircraft, and then the missile will then follow that laser and hit the aircraft, and it'll give the pilot of the aircraft, a very few seconds to actually react to it. So that's why it's so significant, actually, because it's so super fast.
We've been wrangling at ourselves, not fully understanding that it's okay for the UK to give weapons like this, but it's not okay for Poland to give MiG-29 fighters, and the US doesn't want to get involved, the UK doesn't want to get involved in that. And we put that to James Heappey, the Armed Forces Minister, this morning, Larissa, and he drew a distinction between offensive and defensive weapons, the idea that these missiles will be used on Ukrainian soil to destroy the invaders, whereas theoretically, at least, a plane could cross over the border and attack Russia, although that doesn't seem very plausible at all. Do you understand that line, where the line is with the MOD?
Oh, I asked someone about this yesterday. So the way it was explained to me, that if it's a defensive weapon, then basically you'd only use it if something was coming to attack you. Whereas like you could have another weapon that you might try and take out military infrastructure, so that would be more offensive. With the aircraft situation, I think it probably could be both. So I'm a bit unclear about sort of what Heap is saying maybe. But one of the problems, obviously, is that the aircraft would have had to have flown from a neighbouring country, presumably, and then that obviously increases the risk, because would Russia then see that aircraft as a target as it's coming from, say, Germany or Poland? And so I think some people also think it's an escalation to send aircraft because they're nervous about what Russia's already seeing. Are we already sort of pushing at the boundaries of intervening too much? And does aircraft then sort of seem a bigger step, sort of a bigger leap forward?
Meanwhile, Russia is using thermobaric bombs. You've got an explainer of it on the front page of the Times today. How big a deal is that?
I think we were told previously that that these had been seen on the ground in Ukraine, and then for the first time, I think it was yesterday, the intelligence team in the Ministry of Defence then spotted that actually Russia was claiming on one of its state-backed news websites that actually it had been deployed. And I think people obviously think when you sort of describe thermobaric bombs, they're known as sort of vacuum bombs because they basically suck in oxygen to create such a devastating blast at such a high temperature. And so I think people do feel that this is quite an escalation in terms of the weapons that Russia has been using before. But actually, it was explained that you are able to use these weapons in war, but it's sort of strictly regulated. So, for example, you can use it against military targets as long as they don't endanger the civilian population. From what the Russians were saying, they had attacked a 40 Ukrainian, what they described as nationalists, and obviously we have no idea whether civilians were affected as a result.
And that's going to be the question throughout, isn't it? Just finally, Larissa, because we have this picture on the front of the Times. We've been talking about it all morning, the attack on the maternity hospital in Mariupol. Now, the Russians say, I mean, they warned they were going to do this. There's the spokesperson, I think, before the attack happened, saying there were military targets in the hospital. Obviously, the Ukrainians, and really anyone with a moral sense, says you can't bomb a maternity hospital, even if you think there might be nearby military targets. But that's going to be the line the Russians will hold, that this is an urban warfare. Very often it's a dispersed army that they're fighting, going close to civilian targets, and therefore, in the rules of urban warfare, the civilian targets become acceptable to Russia.
Yeah, I think they've obviously got a greater appetite for risk, and they're using unguided aerial bombs, and unless they're flying really low and they struggle then to actually hit the target that they're after, whereas previously we might have seen them use more precision guided weapons, and so it does make it harder for them. But also, we're not clear whether it's just sort of by accident, or do they just not care about collateral damage. We've obviously seen stuff that they've done in places like Syria before, where they've obviously been very, very happy to attack civilians as a result of trying to achieve their ultimate aims.
Yeah, there's the same in Grozny, of course, as well in Chechnya. Larisa, great to speak to you. Thank you for talking us through all of that. That's Larisa Brown, the Times' defence editor.